It was 1 in the morning when I finally pushed open the front door. Before I did, I made a point of rolling up my sleeve to reveal the angry, sprawling abrasion on my forearm. The blood had congealed into dark crimson scabs stark against my pale skin, making the wound look all the more alarming. I took a deep breath, schooling my features into an expression of utmost distress, and then I turned the knob. Sure enough, Mom and Dad were sitting in the living room, their faces etched with worry. The moment they saw me, a visible wave of relief washed over them. "Lily, where on earth have you been, young lady?" Mom's voice, usually so gentle, was sharp with a mixture of fear and frustration. "It's the middle of the night. Your father and I have been worried sick. We tried calling your phone, but it went straight to voicemail. What on earth happened to?" Her words caught in her throat. Her eyes, wide and accusing a second ago, locked onto my injured arm. The reprimand died on her lips, instantly replaced by a look of profound concern. Dad noticed it too. He was by my side in an instant, his voice tight. "What happened here, Lily? Did you fall? Were you in an accident?" I pouted, letting a tremor enter my voice. Today was just awful. I was supposed to have dinner with Chloe and the girls. We just stepped out of the restaurant when this red Cadillac came tearing around the corner, straight at me. The driver, she was terrible. She knocked me down and didn't even stop. Just hit the gas and sped off. I'm so furious. At the mention of a red Cadillac, Dad froze for a beat, his eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. "Did you get a look at the license plate?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I shook my head, feigning frustration. "No, it was too fast, and I think there was a plastic bag caught on it, obscuring part of it. All I saw was that the driver was a woman. She had long chestnut brown wavy hair and was wearing a mask." Dad frowned, saying nothing. Mom, however, was fussing over my arm, her touch gentle but her face pale with lingering fear. "We should call the police, honey," she said, her voice still shaky. "Oh, let's not," I said, glancing at Dad from under my lashes and sighing heavily. "It's just a scrape, really. Calling the police would be more trouble than it's worth. And it would derail my plan," I added silently. Mom's brow furrowed with worry. "Don't say that, Lily. We should report it. Things have been unsettling lately." Unsettling was the right word. Things had indeed been very unsettling. It started a few weeks ago when someone keyed my car while it was parked on the street, carving the word death into the driver's side door. Then came the bizarre anonymous packages: shredded, expensive-looking lingerie, a brand-new maternity dress, opened condom wrappers, and a pair of men's designer underwear. Each delivery was more disturbing than the last. The worst had arrived yesterday. Inside the box was a custom-made doll, a miniature replica of me, except its head had been severed from its body. The bright, painted smile on its detached head seemed all the more grotesque as it rolled around in the box. Seeing it, Mom's hands had trembled so violently she'd nearly dropped the package. She'd immediately started insisting we call the police. I'd managed to calm her down, dismissing it as a childish prank, nothing serious enough for police intervention. "They're busy people, Mom," I'd reasoned. "Are you sure, Lily?" she'd pressed, her eyes still wide with fear. "I have a really bad feeling about this. Honestly, Mom, what actual harm has been done? The police wouldn't take it seriously." Eventually, I'd persuaded her. Throughout that conversation, I'd noticed Dad remaining unusually quiet, his brow deeply furrowed, his mind clearly elsewhere. A small, tight smile played on my lips in the privacy of my thoughts. Back in my room now, I listened intently. Once I heard the soft clicks of my parents' bedroom doors closing, I pulled a large cardboard box from beneath my bed. The doll inside was crafted from polymer clay, its features delicate and lifelike, its proportions perfect. Even the folds of its miniature clothing and the strands of its hair had been sculpted with meticulous care. It was an uncanny likeness. I nodded, satisfied. It was worth every penny of the small fortune I'd paid for it. Yes, the recent spate of unsettling deliveries and tonight's staged car crash were all orchestrated by me. My target, my father. My goal, to protect my mother. According to Grandma, I'd been a handful from the very beginning. When Mom was pregnant with me, she'd been plagued by a debilitating morning sickness that saw her vomiting more than she ate. Insomnia, dry heaves, and alarming hair loss became her constant companions. Her belly grew enormous, yet she herself became gaunt and frail. Hours into labor, I suddenly developed a nuchal cord, the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, necessitating an emergency C-section. Before the anesthesia took hold, Mom repeatedly told everyone around her, her voice weak but insistent, that if anything went wrong, they had to prioritize saving the baby. Relatives hushed her, telling her not to speak of such things. But her words proved prophetic. During the surgery, she suffered a massive hemorrhage. Even in her delirium, Mom kept murmuring, "Save the baby, save the baby." The words were still on her lips when they wheeled her out of the operating room. I survived, but the surgery and its complications cost Mom her uterus. She would never be able to have another child. Dad had wept like a child outside the operating room, swearing to the heavens that even if Mom couldn't conceive again, he would cherish us, his wife and daughter, for the rest of his life. Because of the hysterectomy, Mom aged faster than other women her age. She couldn't do heavy work, and even light exertion left her breathless and weak. Dad insisted she become a full-time homemaker, while he focused on building his business. As his reputation grew, Dad's company flourished. Business trips to meet clients became a regular part of his life. I was 13 when he went on a trip to Guizhou. As usual, he called Mom for their nightly chat before bed. I just finished my evening studies, and Mom pulled me over to say goodnight to him. Dad hated silence. Even when napping at home, he'd leave the TV on. It was the same in hotel rooms. The light from the wall-mounted television reflected off his glasses, creating small white rectangular glints. As I was telling him about school, a dark shadow moved slowly across those glints, like someone walking past the television in his room. "Dad, are you on this trip alone?" The question slipped out, prompted by a sudden sharp unease. "Yes, of course," he replied without a flicker of hesitation. "You be a good girl and listen to your mother, okay? I'll bring you back a present." I mumbled a reply, my heart pounding. Usually during video calls, Dad would lean back against the headboard, propping his phone on his bent knees. It was a comfortable position that showed his whole upper body. But this time he was holding the phone much closer, his face filling almost the entire screen. I suspected he didn't want me to see the rest of the room. After a few more minutes of small talk, he urged me to go to bed, reminding me to study hard. That night I tossed and turned, sleep eluding me. I was young then, too young to understand terms like affair or mistress. All I knew was that Dad had lied to me. He wasn't alone on his business trip. He was hiding something from Mom and me. When he returned, I began to watch him, scrutinizing his every word and action. For days, nothing seemed amiss. Then I saw an unread message on his phone. The sender's profile picture was of a beautiful woman. The message read that she missed my father and wished she could be with him every day. The image of my father, my hero, shattered into a million pieces. I locked myself in my room, utterly devastated. All I could think was, if Dad left us, what would happen to Mom and me? Would our warm, happy home fall apart? I couldn't confront him. I didn't dare tell Mom. I couldn't think of any solution. I spent my days consumed by fear and turmoil. I had just started middle school, and my grades plummeted from the top 5% of my year to the bottom 5%. I was carrying a terrible secret, a weight so heavy it felt like it was crushing me. That summer, on the pretext of needing a change of scenery, I went to stay with my maternal grandparents. Grandpa, a man who had navigated the complex corridors of officialdom for years, saw through my troubled facade in an instant. With a few gentle questions, he coaxed the secret out of me. He sat at his desk, smoking in silence for a long time. Then he called me over, stroked my hair, and told me not to worry. He would have a serious talk with Dad, and he would keep my secret. His reassurance was an immense comfort. A while later, Mom and Dad came to pick me up. Grandpa and Dad closeted themselves in the study for a long, tense discussion. When Dad emerged, he looked thoroughly chastened. Grandpa told me he'd straighten Dad out, that Dad would continue to love Mom and me, and would remain devoted to our family. Overjoyed, I returned home with my parents. Life seemed to return to normal. If anything, Dad was even more attentive and affectionate towards Mom and me than before. I believed our sweet, warm life would continue undisturbed. I never imagined that, on the eve of my wedding, my father would stumble again. The revelation came thanks to my unusually keen sense of smell. Dinner that night was Sichuan boiled fish, the air thick with its spicy, numbing aroma. But beneath the fragrant steam I detected another scent. A delicate, expensive perfume, Yves Saint Laurent to be precise. "Dad, where did you go today?" I asked casually, placing a piece of pearly white fish in his bowl. Why do you ask? He replied, looking up at me. Alarm bells clanged in my mind. Psychology 101, I thought. If you ask someone a question and they respond with a counter-question, the answer is usually something you don't want to hear. I feigned nonchalance. Oh, Chloe said she saw someone who looked a lot like you from behind, going into… what's that place called again? I pretended to rack my brain, keeping my eyes fixed on him. I was at the Canaan Club discussing business. With whom? Were they easy to deal with? I inquired, as if making polite conversation. Just some old fogey, Dad said. Easy enough to talk to, but he dragged his feet on everything. So frustrating. The tender fish suddenly tasted like ash in my mouth. I kept my head down, focusing on my food, but my heart had sunk. Dad wasn't a talkative man. His uncharacteristic chattiness was a clear attempt to cover something up. Besides, the YSL fragrance I'd smelled was their new release, Libra, marketed heavily towards women aged 18 to 25. What old fogey would be wearing that? Outwardly, I remained calm. After our usual post-dinner walk, while Dad was in the shower, I slipped his phone from the nightstand. For decades, his passcode had remained my birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. Adding another layer to my guilt, I quickly navigated through his apps, desperately hoping my suspicions were unfounded. My target was clear. I went straight to his WeChat and Alipay transaction records. Dad, though well-preserved, was nearing 50. If he was having an affair, it was unlikely the woman was captivated by his looks. Money was a far more probable motivator. I scanned for transfers with amounts like 5,200, 13140, or 99,990, numbers often used in China to express affection or commitment, representing, I love you, forever, or long-lasting. I scrolled through 6 months of records but found nothing. Then I pulled out my own phone, opened the calendar, and began cross-referencing dates with holidays. Sure enough, while there were no direct transfers on Valentine's Day itself, the account balances before and after 2 specific transactions around that date didn't add up. This meant he'd made transfers and then deleted the records. If that wasn't a sign of a guilty conscience, what was? Once deleted from the main interface, WeChat transaction details are hard to recover. I quickly switched tactics and checked Alipay. As expected, those records were also wiped clean. But Dad probably didn't know that to truly erase Alipay records, you had to delete them from 3 places: the transfer notifications, the bill itself, and the transaction history's recycle bin on the desktop version. Moving swiftly, I logged into his Alipay account on my laptop, navigated to the transaction recycle bin, and restored the deleted entries. The recipient's information appeared: Vivian Liu. Her profile picture showed a young, beautiful woman with a gentle smile. Thankfully, she'd completed real name verification. I quickly photographed the information and slipped Dad's phone back onto the nightstand. That night, sleep once again eluded me. A person's resolve isn't easily swayed by a few mere words. It was only as I grew older that I truly understood. Dad's change of heart all those years ago, his breaking off the affair, hadn't been solely due to Grandpa's counsel. It had been a calculated decision, a weighing of pros and cons. Grandpa had been an influential figure for many years, and Dad's smooth-sailing business ventures had undoubtedly benefited from that connection. Now, Grandpa was retired, his power diminished, and Dad's wandering eye had evidently become active again. The next day, sporting dark circles under my eyes, I confided in my best friend Chloe. Chloe's husband, Mark, ran a law firm and had connections everywhere. She squeezed my hand reassuringly, telling me not to worry. Mark could dig up everything there was to know about this Vivian Liu, probably even her distant ancestors. The information from Chloe's investigation started trickling in. I was floored by what I learned. Vivian was pregnant. I knew Dad had always wanted a son. Such a vast family fortune, he often lamented, couldn't just be handed over to an outsider, a son-in-law. On one side of the scale was his aging wife and his grown-up daughter. On the other, a young, beautiful mistress and an unborn, late-in-life son. I genuinely couldn't be sure which way his heart, or his ambition, would lean. As I read through the thick file of investigative material, my jaw dropped. This Vivian, while maintaining her relationship with my father, was also stringing along a young fitness instructor she'd met at her gym. And she'd been using Dad's money to go on multiple lavish trips with this boy toy. I let out a long sigh. The heavens have a long memory, I thought. No one gets away with anything forever. Once I had a clear picture of my adversary, I began to set my plan in motion. Operation Save My Family had officially commenced. Step 1. A warning shot. I invited Grandpa over for a visit, ostensibly to help me finalize wedding plans, but my real intention was to sound a warning bell for Dad. Though retired, Grandpa still had many protégés within the system, men he had personally mentored and promoted. During dinner, I deliberately steered the conversation towards Grandpa's political career, casually mentioning a few names and their current high-ranking positions. Dad, bustling about refilling wine glasses and serving food, was conspicuously attentive. I breathed an inward sigh of relief. If Dad impulsively confessed his affair to Mom before my plan was complete, her dream of a happy family would shatter. With Grandpa as a visible deterrent, Dad would have to think twice before making any rash moves. Step 2. My self-orchestrated intimidation campaign. According to Chloe's husband's findings, Vivian had indeed pressured Dad to divorce Mom, but he hadn't agreed. In many people's eyes, women were often stereotyped as prone to hysterics. If Vivian didn't get what she wanted, it would be plausible for her to resort to extreme measures. First, I found a secluded spot and keyed a large ominous death onto my own car. Then I drove home and complained to my parents about the vandalism, lamenting the poor character of some people. They commiserated, but as expected, this incident didn't seem to significantly alarm Dad. Next came the series of packages. Disguised, I acquired an untraceable burner phone and found a random courier on the street to send the first package to myself. Inside was a piece of expensive-looking lingerie, shredded to ribbons. The sender's information was untraceable. The phone number consistently switched off. Mom speculated that perhaps my fiancé, Michael, had some messy past entanglement, and some spurned lover, hearing of our impending wedding, was trying to cause trouble. Poor Michael, not even officially part of the family yet, was already taking the fall for his future father-in-law. I forced a smile and offered some vague reassurances, and the matter was dropped. The second package contained a brand new maternity dress. Dad's face visibly darkened when he saw it. That evening, he claimed to have a business dinner and didn't come home. I suspected he went to confront Vivian. She would undoubtedly deny everything, but whether Dad believed her or not, the seed of suspicion had been planted in his mind, waiting for the right moment to sprout. The third package was even cruder. Opened condom wrappers paired with men's designer underwear. The implication was clear and vulgar. Dad's face turned blacker than the bottom of a burnt pot. He fumbled with his lighter twice before managing to light his cigarette. The fourth package was the centerpiece. I'd found a custom DIY model shop online, sent them my photo, and paid extra for an expedited identical figurine. One bright, sunny morning, I persuaded Dad to watch the movie Taken with me. The film's plot, a father single-handedly taking on a human trafficking ring to save his daughter, was viscerally thrilling. I snuggled closer to Dad on the sofa and sighed softly. These people are so evil. They know a daughter is a father's treasure, so they target the daughter. Dad just grunted, his expression unreadable. Pressed on. Dad, if anyone ever tried to hurt me, you'd protect me too, wouldn't you? He turned to look at me. I beamed at him, my eyes full of a daughter's adoration. He ruffled my hair. You silly girl, what strange things you think about. The arrival of that fourth package shattered our cozy father-daughter moment. Inside the box, the doll, my perfect likeness, lay decapitated. Its wide eyes seemed to brim with unshed tears, yet its lips were curved in a chilling smile. Mom's hands holding the box trembled uncontrollably. She kept repeating that we had to call the police. Dad's face went deathly pale. The fury in his eyes looked like it could burn through the cardboard and reduce the broken doll to ashes. At a chic steakhouse, Chloe and I savored our perfectly cooked steaks, discussing the plan's progress in low voices. Don't you worry about a thing, Chloe said, putting down her knife and fork with an air of confidence. Mark has already gotten the lowdown on the boy toy. I dabbed my mouth contentedly with a napkin, staring at the remaining beef on my plate. For a fleeting moment, I felt a strange detachment. There's an old saying, some are the knife and block, others are the meat. Vivian, blissfully unaware, was now the meat on the chopping block, still lost in her dream of becoming a wealthy man's wife. Showtime. The performance had to be complete. Half an hour later, the red Cadillac Chloe had arranged for me cruised slowly past the restaurant. I timed my exit, feigned a stumble, and threw myself dramatically to the ground, making sure to scrape my arm. "You idiot!" Chloe rushed over to help me up. "I told you it was just an act. Why'd you actually hurt yourself?" Clutching my bleeding arm, I managed a weak smile. "Just aiming for realism. I'm a dedicated actress, you know. A mistress trying to run down his precious daughter." I refused to believe Dad could remain indifferent to that. A red Cadillac, chestnut brown wavy hair. Both details matched Vivian perfectly. That night I slept like a baby. Dad, I knew, was destined for a sleepless one. And the real torment for him was yet to come. On the third day, Dad received a call from a courier. The courier explained that a lady who had sent a package the previous day had accidentally dropped some money, and Dad's business card had been tucked inside the wad of cash. Dad, without a second thought, floored the accelerator and sped towards the courier station. According to the courier, a young man Chloe had hired for his impeccable acting skills. The woman who sent the package had long, wavy chestnut hair and wore a mask and sunglasses. She had been incredibly arrogant. Because the courier had been a bit slow, she'd unleashed a torrent of abuse, calling him a stinking delivery boy and a pauper, heaping insults upon him. The courier, pushed to his limit, had reminded her that all professions deserved respect and asked her to use civil language. In response, she pulled out a thick stack of cash, slammed it onto the young man's face and yelled, "Money talks," before storming off. Dad's business card was in that very stack. Because of her outrageous behavior, the courier remembered her vividly. He solemnly handed the money to Dad, his expression grave. "Sir, I may just be a delivery guy, but I have my dignity. If that lady is a friend or relative of yours, please tell her she needs to learn some respect." Dad's face turned a mottled shade of purple. He stammered apologies, clearly mortified. Watching this unfold via the live feed from a tiny camera Chloe had arranged, I pressed my lips together to suppress a grin. Chloe's actor was a true professional. Even an Oscar winner would have been impressed. I had installed a listening app on Dad's phone earlier, and later that day I heard the aftermath. Fuming, Dad confronted Vivian, warning her to stay away from me. Vivian, of course, burst into tears, wailing that she was being framed and tearfully asking if Dad was tired of her and just looking for an excuse to dump her. They argued heatedly. When Dad tried to leave, Vivian sank to her knees, begging him, swearing her love was true, that she only wanted to bear him a son and didn't even care about official status. How could she possibly harm his daughter? What a consummate actress, a true master of the White Lotus routine. No wonder Dad had fallen for her act. But it was too late now. The courier's performance had cemented Dad's belief that Vivian was a vicious, arrogant woman. However, for the sake of the baby in Vivian's belly, Dad didn't push her too hard. He told her he would book her a flight to somewhere far away where she could carry the baby to term, away from any more trouble. Seeing Dad's resolute stance, Vivian didn't dare argue further. Sobbing, she said she was feeling unwell due to the pregnancy and hoped Dad would accompany her. After a moment's hesitation, Dad agreed. I pursed my lips. It seemed Dad was still clinging to his dream of a late-life son. It was time for him to wake up. The place Dad chose for Vivian's confinement was Cloud Dream Manor, a scenic and tranquil resort in a remote part of Dianchi province. As soon as their plane landed, I boarded the next flight to Dianchi, checking into the room adjacent to theirs. On the same flight as me, though he didn't know it, was Vivian's boy toy. Earlier, I'd sent him a private message on his social media, weaving a carefully crafted tale about Vivian. In my version, Vivian and my father were a typical May-December couple, deeply in love but struggling for years to conceive. Desperate, they'd hatched a borrowed seed plan. Vivian, attracted by the young man's physique and virility, had seduced him solely to get pregnant. Now, her objective achieved, she had callously discarded him and absconded with her husband to Cloud Dream Manor for a peaceful pregnancy. His sweet, innocent-seeming girlfriend had used him as a mere breeding tool. The young man, predictably, exploded with rage and followed the trail of breadcrumbs I'd laid. When the knock came, Vivian and Dad were engrossed in a cheerful discussion about their child's bright future. The sudden appearance of the boy toy at their door was a profound shock. Without a word, the young man lunged forward and landed a solid punch on Dad's jaw. I winced, instinctively pulling the earbuds further from my ears. A pang of guilt shot through me. No matter what, he was still my father. I hadn't expected the young man to be quite so violent. After striking my father, the young man turned his fury on Vivian. "You treacherous bitch. You told me you loved me, that you wanted to have my baby. Turns out you were just trying to steal my sperm. This old cuckold husband of yours must be 70, right? No wonder he can't get it up to make a kid. Vivian shrieked. What are you talking about? I don't know you. Get out. I'll call the police if you don't leave. The young man roared back. Police? Go ahead. You don't know me. Come on, I've still got your naked pictures on my phone. Want me to zoom in for you? His voice was dripping with menace. If you wanted a sperm donor, you should have just said so. Money talks, that's not a problem. But you bitch, you tricked me into a relationship while you had this old geezer at home. I couldn't listen anymore. I ripped off the earbuds and threw them aside. I couldn't bear to imagine the expression on Dad's face. Such humiliation, how could he endure it? After a couple of minutes, I forced myself to put the earbuds back in. I was afraid the young man might actually get into a physical fight with Dad. At Dad's age, how could he possibly defend himself against a man in his early 20s? I heard the young man's cold laughter. Let me tell you, this isn't over. Either you give me a hefty sum of money, or you go and abort that baby. Dad remained silent. I didn't know if he was stunned into silence or if the shock had triggered some medical issue. My heart clenched with anxiety. Then thankfully I heard Vivian's tearful voice pleading with Dad. Arthur, please let me explain. So, he was physically okay at least. Suddenly Dad roared. Get rid of that baby. Listen to me, Vivian swore. Don't listen to his nonsense. The baby is yours, Arthur. It really is yours. The young man crowed triumphantly. What's there to explain? Didn't you tell me yourself that you were with an old man who was all show and no go, a dud in bed? You were talking about your husband, right? He then turned to my father, swaggering. I have a recording of your wife saying that. Want to hear it? Dad ignored him, his voice raw with fury as he addressed Vivian. You go and abort that child. I'm telling you right now, even if that child were mine, I wouldn't raise it. As if that wasn't enough, he added venomously. A shameless woman like you, what kind of decent child could you possibly produce? Vivian must have completely broken down. She had risked her figure and endured the discomforts of pregnancy for this child, all for the dream of securing her position as a wealthy man's wife. Now that dream was in tatters and she was being publicly shamed. She erupted in a furious tirade. How dare you call me shameless? Look at yourself. You're an old man. Why do you think I'd be with you? It's only because of your damned money. I went through hell to carry this baby for you, and now you say you won't raise him. You old cuckold, you old bastard. Dad's voice was tight with rage. Vivian, let me make myself clear. From this moment on, we are strangers. If you ever dare to show your face in my life again, I will use every connection I have to make your life a living hell. I heard a door slam violently. Dad had stormed out, seething. Vivian was left wailing, the young man taunting her mercilessly from the side. Exhausted, I threw myself onto my bed and let out a long, deep sigh. After this, Dad would surely realize who truly loved him. Those opportunistic vixens out there would find it much harder to get close to him again. Half a month later, my wedding took place as scheduled. Mom, radiant and beaming, mingled with the guests, graciously accepting their well wishes. Dad, despite his age, had even applied a light layer of foundation to cover the bruise on his face, which he claimed was from accidentally bumping into something. I smirked inwardly as I elegantly looped my arm through my new husband Michael's, making the rounds to toast our guests. The atmosphere was joyous, with everyone remarking on how sweet and loving my parents were, how dutiful and sensible their daughter was. A picture-perfect happy family. I maintained a polite, serene smile, savoring that moment of apparent bliss. I had believed that with Vivian out of the picture, my family's story would reach a happy conclusion. But life, it seemed, had another lesson in store for me. After our honeymoon, Michael and I returned to our respective careers. The moment I stepped into my father's company building, I realized something was drastically different. The person now in charge, making decisions and giving orders, was my mother, who had previously shown no interest in the business. It was only then, with a sickening lurch, that I realized Mom and Dad, under the pretext of not wanting to disturb our newlywed bliss, had deliberately minimized contact with me during our 2-month honeymoon. Something major must have happened. I frantically dialed Mom's number. Mom, where are you? I'm at home, Lily. Come back, we'll talk then. Her voice was calm, too calm, devoid of its usual warmth. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, as I drove home at a speed that was probably reckless. The truth was waiting for me, yet a cowardly part of me wanted to flee. The roadside scenery blurred past, and a memory from long ago surfaced. Once, during a visit to Grandma, she had unintentionally let slip a secret from many years past. Shortly after Mom became pregnant with me, Dad had been in a serious car accident. Not only had it left him bedridden for 3 months, but it had also rendered him infertile. Mom, to protect Dad's masculine pride, had quietly kept his condition a secret from everyone, including him. Her desperate cries to save the baby during my birth had been her fervent wish to give the Tang family, his family and heir, a bloodline. Thinking of Mom's decades of selfless devotion to our family, only to be met with Dad's repeated betrayals, had solidified my resolve to carry out my plan without hesitation. I hadn't worried for a second about Vivian getting an amniocentesis to prove the baby's paternity. That child was 100% not my father's. Now Dad and Vivian were completely finished. But what had happened had happened. If Mom found out about this latest affair, how would she react? Screaming? Matches? Tears? Divorce? Revenge? Or God forbid something worse like suicide? She was such a traditional woman, her husband her sky, her family her everything. I deeply regretted moving out with Michael so soon. I should have stayed home, spent more time with Mom. Guilt and anxiety tore at me. I cursed myself repeatedly as I sped towards home. To my surprise, the house was peaceful. Mom was kneeling quietly on a meditation cushion in the sunroom, a pair of shears in her hand, methodically pruning a bouquet of flowers. I let out a silent sigh of relief. She still had the presence of mind for flower arranging. Perhaps my fears were unfounded. Her serene composure made my own agitation seem all the more pronounced. I quickly plastered a smile on my face and walked towards her. Mom didn't look up. She simply gestured towards a file folder on the coffee table. "Take a look at that, Lily." Puzzled, I picked up the folder. One glance at the first page and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a voluntary agreement for repayment of funds, with Vivian Liu's messy signature at the bottom. Mom knew. My scalp prickled. I looked at her urgently. "Still not meeting my eyes," Mom said calmly. "The law states that during a marriage any money a husband gives to a third party must be returned. That woman used your father's money, so naturally, I made her pay it back." I was stunned. My trembling fingers flipped to the next page. What I saw was like a thunderbolt. Mom and Dad's divorce agreement. Dad had agreed to relinquish all marital assets, leaving with nothing. "Mom, what is this?" I couldn't stop my voice from trembling. "Lily, Mom knows everything you did." Mom sighed deeply, then rose and took my hand, her touch surprisingly firm. She then proceeded to calmly recount the events of the past few months. It had been my oversight. I was Mom's beloved daughter. How could she not have been deeply concerned by the escalating series of threats? When both Dad and I had resisted calling the police, Mom, fearing Michael might have some unsavory debts or past entanglements, had discreetly hired a private investigator to look into his background. The investigation into Michael, of course, yielded nothing. It wasn't until the arrival of the decapitated doll that the private investigator, putting in considerable effort, traced the online order back to me. My charade was exposed, and with the dramatic showdown at Cloud Dream Manor, Dad's affair became impossible to hide. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hide it from you," I choked out, burying my head in her shoulder as tears streamed down my face. Mom gently stroked my hair. "It's not your fault, dear. I know you did so much to protect this family, to protect me. You've done more than enough." Through tear-blurred eyes, I looked at the wall where our family portrait used to hang. It had been replaced by a serene landscape painting. Had our family truly fallen apart? I murmured half to myself. If Dad agreed to leave with nothing, he must still have feelings for you. Feelings? Mom let out a short, bitter laugh, her eyes instantly turning cold as ice. "I used to believe in feelings too, Lily. But your father has thoroughly disillusioned me. If it weren't for you and your wedding, I wouldn't have waited this long to file for divorce." I hung my head, shame and guilt twisting my insides. I understood. Mom had worried that her divorcing Dad right after my wedding would lead to gossip and tarnish my reputation. "Did Dad agree to the divorce easily?" I asked tentatively. "Of course not," Mom snorted. "The moment I brought it up, he flew into a rage, listing all his contributions to the family, how he toiled away outside while I supposedly enjoyed a life of leisure at home, and how ungrateful I was to want a divorce and try to take his money. Listening to Mom, a chill spread through me. Though Mom didn't have an outside job, she had spent decades looking after Dad and me, managing all the social obligations and household chores single-handedly. She had developed health problems after giving birth to me, preventing her from working. For Dad not only to show no compassion but to disregard her immense contributions to the family and accuse her of being a gold digger. It was beyond outrageous. Mom's voice grew colder. He raged and refused, until I threw the proof of his infidelity in his face. That shut him up. Then he switched tactics, falling to his knees, begging for forgiveness, saying he'd had a moment of weakness. She scoffed. When he saw I was determined to divorce him, and that no amount of begging would work, he finally relented. He agreed to the divorce, but demanded the company entirely for himself and 80% of our household assets. I could hardly believe my ears. Dad was the one at fault, the adulterer, and knowing full well Mom had no independent source of income, he had dared to propose such an unreasonable division of assets. Seeing my shocked expression, Mom gave a humorless smile. I never imagined he could be so utterly shameless once the mask was off. Then how did this happen? I pointed to the agreement where he'd signed away everything. I couldn't understand what had made him change his mind so drastically. I initially wanted an amicable separation, to allow him some dignity. But he chose to be shameless, Mom said, her voice flat. For all these years, though I wasn't involved in the day-to-day operations of the company, I wasn't entirely ignorant of its affairs either. I blinked. It was true. The company's chief financial officer was someone Mom had recommended years ago. A trusted friend. Seemed Mom had a trump card. Almost every company has some irregularities in its books. If one looked hard enough, something could always be found. Sure enough, Mom continued, the evidence I gathered was enough to send him to prison. When he saw it, he was terrified. He meekly signed the divorce papers and agreed to my terms. I was speechless, a shiver running down my spine. When a woman decided to be ruthless, men truly didn't stand a chance. Leaving with nothing versus going to jail, the choice was obvious. What about Dad now? I asked, a wave of complex emotions washing over me. I hear he's gone back to his hometown, Mom said, a flicker of disdain in her eyes. We haven't publicly announced the divorce yet. The official story is that he's gone to explore the Northwestern market. A second attempt at entrepreneurship. She added. I warned him that if he insisted on staying here, with your grandfather's remaining influence, he wouldn't find it easy. My heart ached. His hometown, though technically a city, was remote and economically depressed. After my paternal grandparents passed away, Dad had lost most contact with his relatives there. Now, stripped of his assets and nearing 50, he had no connections and no capital to start over. Second attempt at entrepreneurship was a euphemism for a life of poverty and struggle. The once envied Mr. Thorne was now penniless, his family shattered. The drastic drop in his standard of living, coupled with the immense psychological blow, would likely be unbearable for him. His lonely, bleak old age was already a foreseeable reality. Lily, don't pity your father, Mom said softly, patting my hand. You probably don't know this, but when I was pregnant with you, your father had that car accident. It left him unable to have more children. I kept that secret for over 20 years while he philandered outside, even fantasizing about having a son. Her voice cracked slightly. When I finally threw his medical report in his face, he wept, slapped himself repeatedly, and clung to my legs, begging for forgiveness, promising to start over. But what's done is done. There's no going back for us. Mom's voice was low and hoarse, yet imbued with an unshakable resolve. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and I could hardly believe this was the same woman I'd known all my life. This was not the Mom I thought I knew, the one I'd always perceived as somewhat naive, gentle, solely focused on domestic duties. I'd never realized that my mother, Eleanor, was a towering tree in her own right. She knew how to wield the law as a weapon to defend herself, to reclaim assets from Vivian. She knew how to use leverage to compel Dad to relinquish his fortune. Faced with his pleas, she stood firm on her principles, decisively cutting ties with the past. She was far more clear-sighted, far braver than I. All my elaborate schemes had been to maintain the illusion of a happy family. Mom, on the other hand, had chosen to tear away the mask without hesitation, even if the truth beneath was raw and bloody. Mom gently squeezed my hand. Her wedding ring was gone. Only a faint indentation remained on her ring finger. But her hand was warm and strong, and her gaze when it met mine was unwavering. A sense of peace, profound and unexpected, settled over me. The facade of our perfect marriage, our perfect family, had indeed shattered. But so what? Recognizing the truth, finding oneself, embracing a new beginning. Wasn't that, in itself, another kind of fulfillment? Truer one, perhaps.